It's the afternoon of June 2nd, 2010. We're at the Eagleton Institute at Rutgers for the Rutgers program on the governor. I'm Michael Aron of NJN News. We're going to talk this afternoon first with Hazel Gluck. Hazel was a member of the legislature. She then went on to serve in the cabinet of Governor Tom Kean, wore a number of hats during that period, was a commissioner of insurance, of transportation. She ran the lottery. She would later go on to chair the transition committee of Governor Christie Whitman, with whom she was quite close. She has been a prominent lobbyist in Trenton ever since the Kean era came to a close, and we're going to talk to her about her experiences in Trenton. Hazel, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Where were you born?
I was born in New York City. Raised the first 7.5 years of my life in Brooklyn, in case you can't hear it.
What did your parents do?
My parents were British. Never believe it, would you?
That's what they did? They just...
No, they came here and got married.
Being British?
No, yeah, they did that well. Got married here. My mother was a secretary at times when women didn't work. My dad fell ill. He had TB. In those days, people with TB went to sanatoriums, which was really probably the part of upstate New York that wasn't, after Harlem, that had never been developed, you know. And unfortunately died at 33. So, yeah, she was a tough broad, a tough English lady. Very gracious, very charming.
How old were you when your father died?
About 8.
Brothers, sisters? Only child?
Yeah.
Where'd you go to high school?
Mount Vernon, New York. My mom remarried, and we lived in Mount Vernon. I went from being poor to being very comfortable, adjusted immediately. And we lived in Mount Vernon for a long time until my stepfather, got the idea that he wanted to move to Tom's River because he's of Russian descent and he wanted to be a farmer. There's something about people who come from Russia, they can't quite get it out of, it comes out of their pores. They want to be farmers. So we did that, and I hated it. And my mother hated it. And then I went off to college.
Where?
From the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor.
Good experience there?
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
What was so wonderful?
Well, first of all, the education was great, but I can't say that I focus as much on that as I should have, which I really don't ever want my grandchildren to know, but that's the truth. And what was wonderful was that I could do some of the things I wanted to do. I don't know, there was something in me that wanted me to be part of government, and I did that. I was the head of the Independent Women. I never joined a sorority. And then I went on to become the head of all the women on campus at the university. It was great. I had a great 4 years.
Had you gotten involved in politics in high school?
No, but only in school, not politics, with a small p.
But at Michigan, you became political, would you say?
Yeah, but again, with a small p. It wasn't Republican or Democrat. It was, college stuff.
What did it mean to be the head of Independent Women at Michigan?
Well, there were thousands of us, and there were activities, and there was a governance structure, and we were the opposite of the sorority gals. So we were right in there fighting for what we thought was the right thing for all women, so we thought, and they were fighting for whatever they thought was right for the Greeks. And it was fascinating. And then actually what happened was the gal who was going to step up and become head of all the women on campus, both the sorority and the independents, got pregnant. And even in that day. And so she left, and they asked me to take the post. And of course, I took it. The first semester I was there, I almost flunked out because they put us in a dorm for the first time at the University of Michigan that had 3, actually, it was a series of 4 buildings, had 3 male buildings, male students, and 1 female dorm. And there was no structure to the dorms. So I became head of judiciary, wrote that whole thing, then became head of the dorm, and got called in by the dean of women, who said to me, look, you got to learn to juggle both balls in the air or else you're not going anywhere and you've got talent, so make up your mind and get, I went on academic probation. And she said, make up your mind and get off academic probation so that you can do the things that you are capable of doing. So I got off in a semester, and it was a good lesson, and I loved it there. It's a great experience.
Did you ever run for an office there at Michigan?
No.
What
Yeah,
happened?
the independent women I ran for, but not the other one.
What did you do after college?
I was offered a scholarship, a Woodrow Wilson scholarship, which was you come and get your master's and then you go out and teach for a couple of years. But I had met my ex, fallen in love, and I got married. You know, my day, that was, the career was not number one. It was, you know, you should like become a teacher in case you ever needed to make a living, which I couldn't stand. I took a couple of courses and I called up, I said, that's it. My stepfather said, well, you better take shorthand and typing, which I didn't do either. And I got married.
Who was he?
Medical student,
At
downstate.
Michigan?
No, I met him in Lakewood, New Jersey, downstate.
Downstate New Jersey?
Downstate New York.
Oh, downstate New York Medical Center.
Yeah, they're a SUNY system.
Uh-huh. And where did you and he set up a home?
Well, after he did his internship, he went into service. We came to Lakewood, New Jersey, and lived there a very long time.
How long?
Well, let's see. I was married about 21 years. I bet I lived in Lakewood close to 30 years.
Tell us about Lakewood.
Lakewood was a great town at one time. It was a destination. It was where the Goulds had an estate and the Rockefellers had an estate, and there were hotels, and people came from all over to go to the hotels, and the air was supposed to be pioneer and, you know, pure, and so you came down there for the air, whatever the hell that means. And it was a wonderful town. And then slowly but surely the decay started setting in. And once that happened, people started leaving. And it was very sad. I think Lakewood missed the boat because there was a fellow who wanted to build a shopping center in Lakewood, and the hotel owners were hysterical because they didn't want any competition of any kind. So he went to Brick, the town next door, and built the shopping center, and Lakewood wound up with no base for taxes at all. The thing that saved Lakewood, literally saved Lakewood, is the Hasidic community. And they are there in great number today. And you can't find a parking space in town. And they're the ones that saved it.
How did they save it?
Well, they came in, they filled the residences, they built new residences, they came in and they opened stores and supermarkets and, you know, just commerce, small business. Amazing. Real estate, just amazing. And now I think the yeshiva is probably the largest yeshiva in the world. They're about, I guess they have about 8,000 students now. And the young guy who's the CEO, Aron is probably the most modern. I met him, he was 40-ish, and he became the CEO of the yeshiva. Very bright, bicyclist, great sense of humor, and he runs this whole thing, whatever that is. And they've done a pretty good job. They're sometimes difficult to deal with, but then who isn't?
How'd you get involved in politics in Ocean County?
Actually, I started with the League of Women Voters, which, you know, when you say that today, everybody says, who? You know? But that's how I started. I started with the League and voter registration and yada yada. Became the president of the Lakewood League. When Ann Klein was the president, the national president of the League, Ann Klein became a cabinet officer under Brendan Byrne. And it just sort of snowballed. From there, I decided that's really what I wanted to do. That was my passion, government. I had 2 kids, but it was comfortable. And I just decided that, you know, it was something I wanted to pursue. I lived in Ocean County. My dad was a Republican. My mother used to read PM, which was a very liberal newspaper in the old days. And the conversations at dinner were unbelievable sometimes, but I decided that I was in Ocean County and I better actually believe in the free enterprise system, not the way it is today, and decided I would register as a Republican.
When you say not the way as it is today, what do you mean
Well, I
by
think
that?
it's unfettered and, it's just run wild. BP is a perfect example. The corporations today, the guys on Wall Street, the guys out in Detroit with the cars, it's like they're unfettered and they have very little regulation at this point because over the years, frankly, the Republicans have deregulated a lot of stuff, probably starting with, I don't know if it started with Nixon, but Reagan sure did a lot of it. And it's like anything else, when you don't have any boundaries in which to live, whether you're a child or an adult or a corporation, you tend to start going out of those boundaries. And I think that the free enterprise system in the United States and the right wing, who has been their spokesperson, really, I think they're past the pale right now.
You say that the conversations at the dinner table were something. Were they contentious between a liberal mother and a Republican father?
Well,
Is that what you mean?
a bit, sort of, yeah. Not nasty. Never nasty. She had a British accent. He had a Americanized Russian accent. It's like sitting with Lucy and Desi, It really was a riot. But it wasn't contentious. It's just that she had much more of a liberal bent. And as I said, she had worked for a period of time in her life, and he would say to her, look, I'm in business, and I'm telling you this about the unions, or I'm in business, and I'm telling you this about cutting dresses, or that kind of thing.
At some point you ran for Ocean County freeholder, is that correct?
Yeah, but first I was the Consumer Affairs Director. I got appointed that.
By whom?
By the Board of Freeholders.
Consumer Affairs Director at the county level?
Yeah, started the office. Dear friend.
What year was that?
Oh my God, early 70s.
Okay.
And Joe Buckaloo, who sat on the Board of Freeholders, who was an old and dear friend, helped me get the job. He was one of my mentors, actually.
He's still involved, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He's wonderful.
He was the Ocean County chairman for a while?
He was a great chairman.
So you were Consumer Affairs Commissioner of the county.
Right.
And then you ran for county freeholder.
Correct. Boring.
What was boring, running or serving?
No, serving.
What was boring?
I don't know. There wasn't enough action for me, to tell you the truth. Roads, very nice. I wound up being DOT commissioner, but there was a lot more action at DOT. And whatever else we were doing, they were all nice people. And in those days, there were 2 Democrats on the board. One was a conservative. My 2 colleagues were both conservative, so the 3 of them would vote together, and there were 2 of us, a Republican and Democrat, that would vote the other way because we were more moderate. And of course, the party was slightly hysterical, but that became sort of my mantra, an hysterical party in me.
I know from my many years in Trenton, you were perceived as a pretty liberal Republican.
Well, if you think I was perceived then as a liberal Republican, you should ask some of them now. I'm absolutely, what's the acronym for?
A rhino.
A rhino. Thank
a
you.
Republican in name only.
Absolutely, and I wear that label proudly.
How long did you serve in county legislative office before you decided to run for state legislative office?
I served 1 term, and I said, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. They said, well, you can run for assembly. I said, fine, I'm out of here. And I was lucky enough to win. I happened to get the NJEA backing in the county because they were upset with one of the Democrats that were running. And Jimmy Weinstein, who is now the head of transit in New Jersey and who was commissioner of DOT and was my business partner, I met him and he did my campaign. He was doing PR then, and he did my campaign. We had a great time.
What year was that?
I want to say 79. And then I was in the legislature for 1 term.
In the Assembly?
Mm-hmm.
Never in the Senate?
I loved the House. I didn't want to go to the Senate. But I was I was convinced, stupid, but I was convinced that I should be running for Senate against John Russo. Now, John Russo was absolutely represented our area. I didn't. I was the anomaly. I was pro-choice. I mean, you can rattle off a million things. He was not. And he had done a very good job. His constituent services were phenomenal. So, I mean, there was no reason to throw John Russo out. And I lost. And I lost big time. And I was really upset because I thought...
Was that in 81?
Yeah. Yes, that's when Tom ran.
And you were really upset because why?
Because I really liked the House. I didn't realize then that that was the best thing that could have happened to me. I really liked the House, and I figured, I'd like to stay and whatever.
How did it become the best thing that ever happened to you?
Well, I wound up in the administration, and that is a funny story because I was broke, and I was out of work, and I was divorced. And Frank Holman, who was our administrator, went to become the state chairman, the state Republican chairman, and we had no administrator in Ocean County, so I called Joe Buckaloo and said, "Hey, Joey, I'm home and I'm broke and I need a job. How about putting me in as acting administrator?" "Oh, sure." So he put me in. I was there 2 weeks, and I got a call from Tom Kane because the guys were hysterical. I mean, that's putting it mildly. To have a woman administrator in Ocean County. I'm still the only woman that's ever been on the board of freeholders in Ocean County. Give you some idea of how much progress has been made over the last 150 years.
When did you first meet Tom Kane? Do you remember?
Yeah, I met Tom Kane in '77.
What were the circumstances?
He was running in the primary against Baton. That's the first time I met him. And then I did a really stupid thing. In '81, I backed Pat Kramer. They were really clever.
It didn't seem to cost you.
Well, it almost cost me a lot. In the long run, it did not. But, man, was I taken to the woodshed. You didn't campaign for him. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. It was all a bunch of garbage, and I knew it. And then they sent me off to be interviewed. I guess Tom Kane had it's mine. Tom Kane had an executive search. And I went up there, 2 people, a man and a woman, and they were interviewing me for Human Services Commissioner. And I said to them, "You got to be kidding."
Why?
And they said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I can't be Human Services Commissioner." And they said, "We've never interviewed anybody who said they can't do the job." I said, "Look," I said, "I'm smart. I get it when it comes to politics, but I do not have the managerial background that it takes to be the Human Services Commissioner. It's a big deal. 23,000 people or whatever the devil it was. Maybe that's what it is now." And they couldn't get over it. So when I refused the job and came back home, it's the only time Joe Buckaloo ever picked up the phone and called and yelled and screamed at me, "How could you turn down a cabinet post, yada, yada, yada." I said, "Because I don't belong there." And then I got this phone call from the governor who said to me, "How would you like to be the lottery director?" And I said, "Oh my God, I don't know how to play the lottery." He said, "I didn't ask you that." I said, "Oh yeah, I'd love to. I have no job, I'd love to." So that's how I got the job, on-the-job training.
Who did you support in '77 for governor, do you recall?
You know what, I've been thinking about that, and I think it was Bateman.
But you're not positive?
No, I'm not. I could have supported, I just can't remember.
And why did you support Pat Kramer in the Republican primary in '81?
Interestingly enough, he came out of an urban area. And I always thought that Republicans didn't have enough sense, street smarts, didn't have enough sense about urban areas and street smarts in general. And we have a very interesting state, complicated, and I thought he could do the job. So
he was the mayor of Patterson.
Yeah.
I think he finished second or third? Second, yeah. I guess, in the primary.
Yeah.
So King called you personally and asked you to be his lottery director,
right.
And you accepted right away?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Needed a job? And
I needed a job. I had no idea what I was getting into. No, I didn't have a clue.
What were you getting into?
It was great.
What was
the
great?
best, one of the best jobs I ever had.
How so?
Well, because, you try and do good when you're in government, and I was giving people money, and it was the happiest they I've ever seen people. They give them these big checks, and they were slap happy, and so was I. I had some. The deputy commissioner, the deputy director of the lottery, was a long-time civil servant, Joe Muley, and he was my deputy. He knew it like the back of his hand. He taught me everything, which was one. I mean, in those days, you could make those kinds of relationships, and they worked really well. And I think you probably do it today too. But he taught me everything about the lottery, and it really worked well. One of the funniest things that happened was somebody won. This was way before we had the kind of lottery that we have today. It was just straight. There was no annuity. There was nothing. And I wanted to change it, so I went into the treasurer's office and said, look, we got to do something about this. We're not making enough money. And they said, okay, go ahead. And we did whatever it was we had to do. And of course, we made a lot of money. So when we were giving out checks, I'd call, check in every once in a while, and I'd call and say, does the governor want to give out the check? In this particular instance, they said yes. So we all marched down there one day with one of these big cardboard things, And I'm standing there, and Andy Baglivo used to do the PR for the lottery. Love Andy. And everybody's standing up there and waiting for the governor to come out. All of a sudden, I hear psst, psst. And I go over, and he says, I said, what's the matter? He says, that guy that's going to be standing next to the governor, I think he's been in jail. I said, are you kidding? He said, no, I swear to God. He said, I think he's a jailbird. So
the guy who won the lottery?
Yeah. So I said to myself, oh my God, I mean, this is worse than death. I'm going to shoot myself. What was I going to do? So what I did was I went up and inserted myself between, I thought Tom McCain probably thought it was out of my mind, inserted myself in between Tom and this guy so that he couldn't take a picture of this jailbird with Tom. So I got through that one.
Do you recall much about the period of the recount between Kane and Florio? Were you just a bystander at that?
I was a bystander, but I a little bit, but I was a bystander. The night that we were all called to the hotel in North Jersey, I forget where it was, Millicent Fenwick was there. This is like a sidebar story.
Is this election night or subsequent?
No, this is like a month later, after the recount. She was there. She comes into the room, smoking a pipe. And of course, all the photographers and everybody go straight over to Millicent. The pictures, the flashbulbs. I'm saying to myself, oh my God. That passes, and we're waiting and waiting and waiting for Corder to come out, Jim Corder to come out on stage and make the introductions.
This is a victory declaration?
Yes. Sorry, this is a victory declaration. It was going on and on and on. So she lit up again. I thought, I might kill myself. And again, all the flashbulbs went off of the room. And I went up to her and I said, Congresswoman, you can't do that. Now, I mean, I hardly knew Millicent Fenwick. Maybe met her once. I said, you can't do that. And she looked at me and she said, why not? I said, why not? She said, okay.
Because it detracted from Tom Kane?
That's all she had to do was be smoking a pipe when he came out to accept the, oh my God, it would have been disastrous. She had beaten him in an election, so there was not, there was still some hard feeling there.
She beat him in a congressional primary in 75, I guess.
Yeah.
How long were you lottery director?
I was lottery director for about 3 years, and then they called and said to me, the governor wants you to be the insurance commissioner. This was right after my mother passed away. And I said, what? And they said, he wants you to be the insurance commissioner. I said, you're out of your mind. I don't know anything about insurance. I can't even read my own policy. Well, that's what you could do there. I said, give me a break. Come on. Well, that's what Frank Holman, okay? Greg Stevens, who was chief of staff at that time. I said, I don't believe either one of you. And besides which, I just lost my mother. Leave me alone. The governor called me and asked me to be the insurance commissioner. I said, of course. I said, why do you want me? He said, because you're the best communicator I have in the cabinet. I'm running for re-election, and insurance is a real problem, and we got to get through this. I said, okay.
Is it that simple?
No.
That when a governor's aide calls, you can say no, and when a governor calls, you can't say no?
No, it's just being, no. I mean, they indulged me, but it's not that simple. Actually, I think it should be. I think, if if an aide calls and says, you know, the governor would like you to do this, and you say, well, I'm inclined to do it, then the governor should call and ask you. That's how I feel about it. But I wasn't inclined at the time. So they knew if he called, I'm not going to say no to him. Of course I'm not going to say no to him.
I guess what I'm really asking is it possible to say no to a governor?
Well, I didn't become the Human Services Commissioner, but he didn't ask me directly. Is it possible? Yeah, I think under certain circumstances it's possible. Certainly if you don't, if you don't think that it's the right thing to do, yeah. I mean, I don't think you follow anybody blindly. I really don't. I mean, that's, you know, that's the excuse that's been given through history, you know. I did what I was told to do. If it's not ethical or it's not practical or whatever, you don't do it.
Tom Kaine's first year was a bit rocky, as I
Yes.
recall. What do you recall about his first year?
I recall that his chief of staff had a huge pile of papers on his desk that never moved.
That was
From
Lou Thurston?
Yeah. Nicest guy in the whole world. But couldn't get from point A to point B. And it was really tough. It was really tough. Of course, I was involved in my own little thing and the lottery, and Tom came to see all of us because we raised so much money that they had never anticipated we were going to raise. And I was in a shopping center with leaks in the ceiling and buckets on the floor. So when he was there, I said to him, you know, they were all great people. You think we get a new office? So we got one. But, yeah, very rocky. It is for most governors, interestingly enough, because as good a legislator as Tom was, or as good a United States Senator as Corzine was, or as good a mayor as you might say McGreevey was, or whatever, they still don't know what it means to be governor. First of all, it's a huge bureaucracy that you're responsible for. And second of all, we don't have a product. We have services. We don't have a product. And we have people who have been there. The attitude of the people in the departments of state, for the most part, is, you know, we were here before you came, and we're going to be here after you go. So you really have your work cut out for you, and it is not easy. And it is very, very different from what they expect. Very different.
So Kaine changed chiefs of staff after 1 year, is that correct?
Yeah. Maybe less than a year, I'm not sure.
He also was forced to raise taxes in his first year, I think unhappily so, by a democratically controlled legislature. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, yeah. Unhappily so, but he probably knew that we needed it anyhow. You know, Tom. You know, smart guy.
Tell us about Tom a little bit.
I love the man. I think he is, without a doubt, the sanest and the kindest and the most centered politician I know. Anytime I presented him with anything, Department of Transportation, whatever it was, he always reached for what was the right thing, not what was the expedient thing. You know, I'd give him all the pros and cons from a policy point of view and then from a political point of view. And I never, ever saw him reach for the wrong thing. I mean, he's an amazing guy. And we had this gang of five, we called them, 5 women, and we used to go in to see him once a month, and he loved it.
Who were they?
Ming Shu.
She ran international trade.
Oh, no, yes, with my memory. She was
Jane Burgio.
Jane Burgio, the Secretary of State. Help me with this, Michael.
I just gave
Barbara
you
Carr
one.
was on the bench by then. The gal who was Elizabeth Lyons, who was head of small business or something like that. The gal who works for J&J now.
Joan somebody? Joan Haberly?
No, it wasn't Joan Haberly. There were 2 others.
Okay.
There were 5 of us.
Okay. Joan Wright?
Joan Wright.
Joan
Joan
Wright.
Wright was one of them. And the last one, who was just brilliant, I've forgotten her name. She wound up as his chief of staff. She was with DEP for a while.
Oh, I know. None. Not Brenda Davis.
Yes,
Oh, Brenda Davis? Yeah,
Yes,
she was
yes.
chief of policy and planning
Right.
for a while.
I don't know if she was one of the Gang of Five. Yes, she was. But we used to go in to see him and tell him that we thought there were certain things that I don't know what they were at this point, but he should or shouldn't be doing with regard to women. And he loved it. You know, he'd have rump around me. He loved it. He just loved it. And he always saw us, which was really very sweet. And he probably thinking, oh my God, you know, these women. But I'll tell you something really interesting. The day that Christie Whitman was sworn in as the first female governor of the state of New Jersey, Tom Kane, this is in the War Memorial Building, was standing over by himself in front of those big heavy curtains, all by himself. And I went up to him and I said to him, I hope you realize that if it weren't for you, she wouldn't be here. And he looked at me, got a little embarrassed, and he shuffled his feet. I said, it's true, Tom. I said, you gave all of us, he did, this wonderful opportunities, including Christie, who was up at BPU. I said, and here you are. This is one of the fruits of, of your labor. It wasn't labor for him. She was the governor of New Jersey. And I really believe that. I think you have to have somebody who doesn't care about whether you are straight or gay, male or female, or white or black. I think you have to have somebody in the governance position, the power position, who wants you there because he or she thinks you're really good. And nothing else matters. And he was like that. And he wrote the book, The Politics of Inclusion, which the Republicans, after he left, immediately forgot about. But and he was serious about it. He believed it. He lived it. I think he's a very special man.
Was there some kind of bipartisan coalition for women's appointments?
Yeah, that's right. It was right here at Eagleton.
How did it work?
Well, I don't know. We kind of threw it together, and when Tom was running, and then later on, we didn't do it this year, which is really interesting. Just a bunch of Republican and Democrat women who came together, made up lists, and started banging on the heads of the people in power and their parties. If a Democrat won, we all would get behind the Democrat women to make sure they got appointed, and vice versa. It was wonderful. And Eagleton facilitated that, and that was great. That was a fun thing to do. We didn't do it this time. You kind of lose that kind of stuff, which is, I think people think because we're beyond it, but we're not. We're really not.
You still have to fight for what you get?
I think so. I think so.
When you were insurance commissioner, was no-fault auto insurance a large issue?
No. Interestingly enough, no. I had a bottle of aspirin this high on my desk. It was the liability crisis when I was there, for the year I was there. It was unbelievably horrendous. It was insurance companies who were going to cancel daycare centers and Atlantic City insurance, and the whole state of New Jersey was being affected by it. And I had a guy from the public advocate's office and a guy from the attorney general's office. I didn't know what was, I knew, but I didn't know how to handle it. And we lived together, literally in my office, for about 8 months. And we finally got a piece of legislation passed that said they couldn't do this, summarily just couldn't cancel. And it went to the Supreme Court here, and we won. And by the time that happened, the liability crisis was over. But I often wonder sometimes whether people remembered that we have that in our back pockets. I mean, Tom was great with that we have that in this state in our back pockets. And other states were watching us at the time because they would do the same thing. But then the liability crisis was over, so nobody bothered. It's like everything else. It's the crisis du jour, and then instead of going ahead and doing it, so in a decade when it happens again, you have the tools to work with, you just say, oh, well, forget about it. One thing we did, though, I'm very happy about. We made it possible for ordinary people to read their insurance policies. I was like deaf on that. I don't know what the hell they were talking about. Plain language.
You said that that's what they told you to do when you said you didn't know anything about your own insurance policy, so you took them seriously?
And and interestingly enough, I had help from Chrissy Jackman, who could not speak, as you well know, a wonderful man. Guy, sit down over there.
Former Democratic Speaker of the Assembly.
Correct. And he helped. I said, you know, I'm going to put this in plain language. That's what I got to do. I got to be able to stand when I got my insurance policy. I said, you're right.
So do we have plain language insurance policies today in New Jersey?
Well, yeah, I have a great insurance company, so I understand what they're sending me. And I think it's better. I do. I think it's better.
Did you change anything at the lottery in your 3 years there?
Yeah, there was no annuity then. And we changed it almost immediately.
How does that work? Explain what the annuity is.
Well, it's a buildup of money, and you pay it out over 20 years, or you get less cash. So when you see that it's $150 million, that's over 20 years. If you have asked for cash, instead of getting paid out, over a period of time, it's less money, but then you get the money up front. So
did that end up saving the state some money to go?
The state does well. It's the fourth largest revenue source in the state, and they weren't doing it because Brendan Byrne didn't want to do it. So I never, I said, well, hell with it, I'm going to try. And we did it, and oh my God. I mean, the largest jackpot we had. We changed vendors because there were long lines of people who were waiting to buy lottery tickets, and the machines kept breaking down. So in the middle of everything else, I had to worry about that. And and I know you're going to be speaking to him, but the first person that I spoke to and went to a meeting with over in the Attorney General's office was McGlynn.
Ed McGlynn.
Yeah. Because we had such problems with the machine guy. And he may not tell you this story, but he pulled me aside and he said, you're not going to believe this, but my wife won the lottery. I said, get away from me. Get away from me. I just got here.
So about 3 years into the administration, you went from lottery to insurance.
For about a year.
In part to help Tom Kean get reelected in '85. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that election. What do you remember about the campaign of '85?
Well, it was a blowout. I mean, everybody knew it was going to be a blowout. I mean, Tom had decided to divest our interests because, any interest that we had that had to do with South Africa. That was a huge, huge move and the right thing.
Symbolically, a huge move. More than dollars and cents, a huge move.
Maybe, but symbolism sometimes is better than, the actual money that you might.
I think we were the first or maybe a second state to take this action.
Scott King came here to thank him. And as I remember correctly, that sort of blew the lid off everything. And the teachers, NJEA, had been fighting with him for 4 years and gotten nowhere. He had beat him at every turn, so they decided to throw the towel in. So it was a runaway. And insurance never came up, thank God. Only in the sense that, nobody wanted to lose the insurance, whether it was Atlantic City or a daycare center or whatever it might have been. So we were on the side of the gods, with insurance. We were on the side of the people. So it never became an issue because car insurance was like somewhere over here in the background. So it all worked out well.
And as I recall, 5 Democrats ran for the privilege of running against this popular governor. Yeah. Peter Shapiro won.
Nice man.
Did you know right away that Peter Shapiro would be trounced in the fall?
Not right away. But it started, as it evolved, it became evident. I thought, I didn't know how big it was going to be. It was huge, but...
I think it was the largest margin of victory in New Jersey history.
And I think the people of this state, not that they knew him. They didn't know Peter. They knew him. And Tom Kean is a really decent human being. And he comes across that way. And I think the people of the state really liked him. And that, no matter what you say about anything else, that's very, very important.
How important were those tourism ads that he did in terms of...
New Jersey and You're Perfect together?
Yeah.
It was hysterical. I think everybody probably across the country laughed. But, that was okay. Better they laugh at that than at our corruption.
What turned it around from rocky... You say every governor has a rocky first year, or many do. What turned it around in years 2, 3, and 4 that would enable
Greg
him?
Stevens was smart and tough.
Greg Stevens.
Yeah, smart and tough. And he just took charge. you know. And he did it well. You know, I think when you've been in the, in the newspaper business or television or whatever, you've got to be versed in so many things. And if you're not, you have to find the quick way to become versed. And he did a fabulous job. He really did. You know, he's a good man. And I think Tom had a lot of confidence in him. That's also important.
Who else were the key people in the administration at that in that first term?
Well, the media, Carl Golden was key. I mean, Tom Kane got up every morning and called Carl Golden, who already had read the newspapers or whatever. Yeah.
What was Carl's skill?
Well, Carl, pretty good at analyzing things. He had a good political sense, I think. You know, and you have to understand Tom, a governor's personality. Tom was not the kind of a guy who's going to shoot from the hip, and I think Carl knew it. And Carl gave him good advice.
The council in those days?
There were a couple of them.
Was Carrie?
Who was just, I love Carrie. He was terrific counsel. He really was. And then Mike
Cole.
Yeah, who was also a hell of a guy. Bright, substantial. You know, they had a really good front office after the first 8 months. They had a really good front office, and that is really important. But Tom Kane was the kind of man that gave you your head. In other words, he put you in a job, and he let you do the job. He didn't micromanage you. If you didn't know how to, if you did not know how to present yourself, or the things that were, or if you didn't have the instinct for the things that were important, the things that he should know about, you were in trouble. But if you had those things, he let you go. I mean, any other governor in their right mind probably would have said, enough already with you in the newspapers, me at DOT. I was in the newspapers all the time. He never said a word.
Let's go to DOT. When and how did that happen?
I got a phone call, and
from whom?
I don't remember. I don't think it was the governor. And I got a phone call, and they said, you know, we promised you, because they promised me they'd get me out of insurance. We promised you that we would have something else for you, and we'd like you to be DOT commissioner.
Was this shortly after the re-election?
This was not long after the re-election. This was in 86-ish. Yeah, 86, maybe 87. And I said, that's terrific. And then I hung up, and I picked up the phone, I thought about it, and I called Barbara Curran, who was a judge at that time, and then a former assemblywoman, and former director, first and probably only female director of the Republican State Committee, years and years ago. And I said to her, you know, Barbara, I think that I can really do something here to make a difference at insurance. So I don't know whether I should do this. She said to me, are you out of your mind? Get out of there. You never want to be in a regulatory department of state. Get out. So I figured, oh, she's probably right. And of course, it was the best job I ever had.
What made you think that you could manage a large operation like the DOT in 1986 when you thought you couldn't handle human services in 1982?
Good question. I had had experience, and I felt a lot more confident in myself. And, you know, I mean, I ran a consumer affairs office. Maybe there were 15 people in it, from 15 to 35,000, however many people in human services. But I could make the leap from insurance to the Department of Transportation. And by that time, along the way, I had met wonderful people that I dragged with me from department to department, and that I would trust with my life, and you have to have people like that around you. And it worked, for whatever that means, while I was there.
Did you serve through the whole second term as
No, I left in 89, in the summer of 89.
About 6 months before the administration.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back for a second. What did you do as DOT commissioner?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. I was asked to come to the governor's office after they had asked me to be DOT commissioner. I went, and there was a don't ask me who all the people were because my memory is not what it used to be, but Peg Howard was in the room, and the governor was in the room, Roger Bodman was in the room, I was in the room, and a couple other people. And Roger, who had been at the Department of Transportation for 1 year, says to me, well, Hazel, he starts it off, well, and I knew it was a setup as soon as he started it off. Well, Hazel, you know, you're going to take over the Department of Transportation. I know you're going to do a good job, but there's one thing you have to do that I didn't get to do. He didn't, I mean, maybe it wasn't the right time because it was an election year. And I said, and that is, he said, raise the gas tax. I said, oh, God. And I said, oh. He said, yeah, and you got to go out, you know, and other people chimed in. You got to make sure that the public is persuaded, and on and on and on. And I said, okay. And then I looked at Tom Kean, and I said to him, and where will you be? And he looked at me and smiled, and he said, I will be there whenever you need me. I said, okay. And then I went back to my office, and about 45 minutes later, I got a phone call from Peg Howard. Are you out of your mind? I said, why? She said, nobody ever talks to the governor like that. I said, what, are you crazy? I have to know that. I said, since you're all in the room, I figured, what am I going to ask him the question? I'll ask him then. And he was. And we spent a lot of time, maybe 2 years, mostly because of John Russo, who just, you know, wanted to give me a hard time. But we spent I mobilized the whole department. We went to every Lions Club, you name it, we were there, and spoke all over the state of New Jersey, myself included. And then when it came time to negotiate, they threw me out of the room because I wanted to kill Brad, a lobbyist.
Brewster.
I wanted to kill him.
Why?
Because I asked for a nickel and he didn't want to give a nickel. We wound up with 2.5 cents after 2 years. I wanted to kill him. They threw me out. The administration threw me out of the...
What was Brewster at the time? Was he a lobbyist or was he
No,
executive
he was
director of the
the
Assembly Republicans?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was this in conjunction with the creation of a transportation trust fund, or had that been done already?
That had been done by John Sheridan, who did a wonderful thing. John Sheridan and Jim Weinstein, actually, had created the Transportation Trust Fund, and we...
In the first term of the Kean administration.
Right, and we didn't have enough money, so we needed to raise the gas tax in order to... It was supposed to start... It was a 10-year program. You bonded, and you took all the things, federal government stuff, and you put it all together and did the bonding and had a program, and by the 10th year, the first year bonds were paid off, and you started over again. Don't ask what's going on now. By June of 2011, all we can do is pay the debt. It's been bonded to death. So, yeah, that was that. We did a lot of things that was at the beginning of the changing of what the Department of Transportation considered itself. We never talked about a road when we didn't have transit up at the same time to see if there were ways that we could enhance transit rather than build a road. I mean, that was just at the beginning of that kind of talking and that kind of understanding that planning and access and mobility and safety and clean air, that was just at the beginning of all of that being factored into what the department was going to do. And as it turned out, they've done a pretty good job. I mean, we don't build roads anymore because they're all jammed, but we don't build them. We really need to get on with transit now, because the more transit we have, the more people get off the roads.
In retrospect, was 2.5 cents a mistake? Should it have been 5 cents?
Absolutely.
Why?
Well, because we wouldn't have run out of money as quickly as we did, although I must say, a lot of governors took money from that. And also, one of the mistakes we made, and I begged labor, begged them, was that it wasn't dedicated. I wanted it to go on the ballot and have the people of the state of New Jersey dedicate the money, the 2.5 cents to transportation. Never did it, and of course it's been kind of fudged around. So, we made a couple of mistakes. And we also, that was the time when Tom Kean was really exasperated with all the independent authorities, so he decided to put the Transportation Commission on all of them. Oh, that was wonderful.
Talk to us about that. What authorities did you serve on or oversee?
the Parkway, where we ran into a whole brouhaha about credit cards, which you don't have enough film and enough time to go into. The Turnpike, where the first time I went there, there were lobster luncheons, and I thought, oh my God, these people are out of control. The South Jersey Transportation Authority, to which I think I sent somebody else. And of course, I was on transit. I was chair of the transit board anyhow, as commissioner of DOT. So eventually I wound up sending people to these things, because you can't do everything to represent me, but it was an eye-opener.
Give us the short version of the Parkway credit card issue.
Well, we had a lady who was chair of the board.
Judith Stanley?
Judith Stanley. She was chair of the board.
It was the New Jersey Highway Authority
Authority.
And it ran the Parkway.
Right,
Okay.
Garden State Parkway. And we had a credit card issue come up with New Jersey Transit, and I'm sitting in the office and I'm saying, oh my God, I wonder if there's anybody else. So I put a feeler out to the Parkway and found out that a couple people had credit cards.
Oh, you mean these are credit cards for use by executives
Yeah.
of the agencies, not using credit cards to pay your toll or anything like that?
No, not at all. Not at all.
is
It was no
credit
Easy
card-
Pass then, but no, not at all. These were credit cards for people to use. God knows why. I didn't have one. I couldn't understand why everybody else had one. But, and she had charged lipstick and some other, I mean, not nonsense on it, and it became a whole big thing. And but the situation was even bigger than that, was with Transit and the executive director, Jerry Primo. I'll never forget that as long as I live.
What did he do? I
Oh my
remember
God,
he was in the newspaper.
Tiffany's, and I mean, he put everything you could ever imagine on the credit card and never paid it back. So that means you and I were paying for whatever his largesse was, whatever he was, I don't know what his problem was. But Jerry was very charming, very gracious, and totally a BSer. Okay, he's not without talent. He had talent, but that became a big deal. I had to fire him.
Did he stay in the transit field, do you know?
I'm sorry?
Did he stay in the transit field after he
Yeah, he
left New
did.
Jersey Transit?
Yeah, he did.
So that behavior didn't ruin his career? Just,
I don't think
just
so.
derailed
Just
it?
got him a lawyer, me a lawyer. I mean, it was a pretty big deal. That's when my hair started turning really gray.
Yeah? But you liked being DOT
I
commissioner.
loved it. I loved it. It was good stuff. And somewhere along the way there was 88 probably. I got a telephone call from Tom Kane, and he said to me, how would you like to serve on the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey? Stunned. I was totally stunned. I couldn't find my voice. He said, I have never heard you silent before. So I started to laugh. I said, I'd love to. I said, I'm just stunned. He said, well, I want you to know this is for you. He said, this is not because you're commissioner. This is for you. That, to me, said it all.
Did that happen?
It sure did.
So as DOT commissioner, you were sitting on the Port Authority
Yeah.
board? That's pretty unusual, is it not?
Well, it used to be that the commissioner automatically sat on it, which is pretty, it's not necessary. I think Sagner was on it. But it hadn't been for a long time. And it wasn't, as he said to me, it wasn't because I was DOT commissioner. I was on there during Jim Florio's whole first term. See, the Port Authority is not a partisan thing. It's a New York, New Jersey thing, which is totally different because you can be a Republican, a Democrat, an independent. If you're from Jersey, you want what Jersey's supposed to get. A New Yorker, the New Yorkers are always trying to outmaneuver the Jerseyans. So we were a band of people from Jersey, and they were a band of people from New York. It was an entirely different thing. It was wonderful. It was fabulous. And the one thing I'll forever be sorry for, I gave it up when Christie came into office. She asked me if I wanted to chair it. I thought about it because I really did. And I said to myself, how the hell is going to take care of my business? You know, I got to make a living. It was stupid, very short-sighted.
Why? How so?
Because I could have done both. I could have done both. And at that point, I just wasn't sure that I could. So, and I also thought to myself, typically, really a stupid thing. I thought to myself, well, you know, if they know that we're friends and I'm the chair of the Port Authority, maybe that'll make it some difficulty for her. Baloney. It never would have made any difficulty for her. It just would have made everybody salute a little more. I mean, it was the wrong move, but that's the way it is.
You talked before about Tom Kean letting you do your thing as someone who worked for him. To what extent do you think cabinet autonomy was greater under Kean than under other governors?
Well, I think there was no question that the autonomy of the cabinet, now not all the cabinet, there were some people in the cabinet that didn't get the joke. And Greg Stevens knew who they were. And every once in a while I get a phone call and they say, how do you do this? I don't know how to do this. And how do you explain people about politics in 5 or 10 minutes, you know? Or when Brenda Davis was made chief of staff, she called me up, she said, now look, I don't know anything about politics. She said, so you're gonna have to help me. I said, whatever you want. At that time I said, sure, whatever you need. I'm sorry, your question was?
My question was there more autonomy in
that
administration than in any other that you've known?
I don't know about Brendan Burns. I mean, there could have been then too. But I think that there certainly was more autonomy then than there was, I would say, in the last 2 governors. I don't know about Florio. I mean, actually, there wasn't much autonomy. I take that back because he had his treasurer testify for everybody in the budget hearings. Crazy. It's crazy. You know, if I went out and got in one of those crazy machines that they have to pave or whatever and, got in there and they took my picture or something like that, I get people say to me, hey, I saw you in the newspaper on that. There has to be this touch between cabinet, governor, and the real people. You have to be able to somehow transfer that feeling that although Tom Kean was from the manor born, he got the joke. That's why he got dragged into a beer joint in Hoboken. Because everybody was afraid that because he was to the manor born that he would not understand the problems of real people and their lives, which actually was not true.
That's the second time you've used that phrase, getting the joke. Getting the joke means understanding the political landscape, right?
Exactly. A lot of people don't. A lot of governors don't. I think John Corzine is one of the loveliest people I've ever met. But he did not get the joke. He just didn't. And a charming guy. I had dinner with him, just delightful. It's just, And Jim Florio, nice man, but he also, when you have the treasurer testify for everybody, you're sending a message that is really bad.
That was Doug Berman, his treasurer. Back then.
Bright, but so what?
I remember something called GMIP, the Governor's Management Improvement Plan.
Yeah.
Was that,
God,
what was that? What was
they
that
all
about?
do it.
That was a government reorganization effort?
Yeah, every one of them do. Well, this governor's not doing it. He's just cutting, which he has to do. But I got a phone call, and they said, we're going to come see you. We were going to GMIP this. I said, what? Well, we have to come in and see where you can lose people. I'm making money. So I pick up the phone, and I call...
At the lottery?
At the lottery. I pick up the phone and call Alpha Solar.
What's his position? I remember him, but what was his position at the time?
I don't know what his title was. He wasn't treasurer. I don't know what his title was. I think he was head of GMIP, as a matter of fact.
Yes, that's right.
I think he was head. And I said to him, Al, you really want me to do this? He said, well, how are you doing? I said, we're doing great. We're making money, more money than the administration. He said, that's it, forget about it, you're not GMIP'd. That was it. So I never had the pleasure of being GMIP'd.
Other things that stand out in one's memory about that administration is the education reforms.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Which ones come to mind in your mind?
Well, I guess the one that comes to mind is, when you graduated college, if you wanted to give a year or two of your life, I think it was 2 years, without a teacher's degree, God forbid, you could go into the school system, which the NJEA fought like crazy. But in the long run, a lot of talented young kids came into the school system for a couple of years and then left, but gave this wonderful experience, knowledge, whatever, caring to the kids. That was one of them.
That was called the alternate route to teaching.
Yeah, it was a good deal.
There was a minimum teacher salary that Tom Kane set at $18,500, which doesn't sound like that much anymore.
I know, but then it was.
There was the school takeover bill that he shepherded through to enable the state to take over failing urban schools.
Yeah.
There were a few more.
Yeah, and they were all well-intentioned. I think that, for instance, the Newark school system, which the state took over, to me, when you're spending $1 billion on educating kids and you got maybe 15-20% of them graduating, we are failing by a wide margin. So that may be the beginning of something, but we sure as heck haven't done anything that we should have done, in my opinion. I don't mind paying for kids to go to school. I don't have any more kids in school. But I want them to get educated. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And I don't think you can just keep pouring money in. I know it's the biggest patronage. I'll probably get shot for this. I know it's the biggest patronage pot in Newark, but too bad. If we don't save these kids, if we don't give these kids a chance to be educated, if we don't do all the things we're supposed to be doing for children, then this country is going to be a third-class country.
Was Tom Kane courted for national office when you were around him? Or did he aspire to national office?
I think he wanted to be vice president.
Do you?
That off-year election stuff is a killer for any guy or gal who's governor. Christie went off to the EPA. Shouldn't ask me. I would have told her, forget it. Hell wants to be in the EPA. It's that, you leave. She left. She had $1 billion surplus. It was spent that whole next year, and she was the one that got the blame for it. Hello. That off-year election, first of all, it makes New Jersey have an election every year. I mean, you get so tired of the campaigning and asking for money and whatever, and the people turn it off. They tune it out after a while. And then when you're in the governorship, it puts you in a situation where, you have to decide if you are approached for higher office. You have to decide whether or not that you want to leave, which is, it's not a good thing to do, in my opinion. Tom Kane also was touted for the United States Senate. He would have been a wonderful United States. He would have been a wonderful anything, but he would have been a great United States Senator, I think. He's a gentleman, smart, understands the issues. I think when he co-chaired the 9/11 Commission, some of the articles that I saw that were written about him was how different he was from everybody in Washington, who were all a bunch of climbing up all over each other's backs, egomaniacs, and he was a gentleman, and he was, he carried himself as a gentleman, and he brought a whole different set of standards and a whole different feeling with him as co-chair of that commission. It would have been great. But I think by that point, I'm not sure whether, this was a family issue or whatever it was, but he passed up the opportunity, and I was always sorry for that. I think the state lost a great man.
Is there a particular moment we're talking about? Was it 1990, after his governorship, that he should have run for the year that Christie Whitman got the nomination for U.S. Senate and ran against Bill Bradley?
Yeah, that might have been it.
And 2 years prior, when there was a presidential election and George Bush selected Dan Quayle, you're saying that you think Tom Kane wanted to be selected by George W. Bush?
Do I know?
George H.W. Bush?
Well, yeah, they were friends. They had known each other for a long time. And I'm sure he would have been absolutely delighted. And he knew how to spell potato. So that would have been a plus.
What do you think Tom Kane's strengths as a leader were?
First of all, Tom Kane had a lot of confidence in himself, enough confidence in himself to be laid back enough He didn't have any of these feelings of insecurity, which I think drive a lot of people, and especially in politics. Business, you know, it could be your business, could be the tire business, doesn't matter what it is. I think if your personality is such that you are not secure, you behave in a different way than you do when you are secure. And I think Tom Kane was very secure, knew who he was, and was not unhappy with himself. And as a result of that, I think he led from strength. He could let you do your job. If you understood what your job was about and you knew this was a big deal, you called the front office, you called Carl Golden, you said, this is what I want to do. You know, I think maybe the governor should do it. And they'd call back and say the governor wants to do it or he doesn't want to do it. But he was able to let people perform. He thought he had good people. As it turns out, there were a couple people in the cabinet who really needed help. But other than that, there was one person in the cabinet that he had somebody else follow around the whole time because he wasn't sure whether the guy was going to do something stupid or unethical or whatever. But having said that, he just had the ability to allow people to do their job. I mean, I think of me. I was probably in the newspapers just about as much as any cabinet officer, maybe as much as the governor and I had. This we were doing. I mean, we were busy all the time, and I was talking to reporters all the time, and I was in the papers, my picture, not my... He never said a word to me. I never got any kind of hint from anybody in the front office that he was unhappy that I was doing what I was doing. I think he thought it was fine.
Do you think that security sprang from a privileged upbringing or from many years of service in the legislature in Trenton, or a combination of the two?
All of the above. I really do. And he overcame stuttering. You know, yeah, all of the above. I think he's a very special guy, I think.
Was there a weakness in him as a leader?
It's interesting. From my perspective, there wasn't, but I was not in the front office. And I think that's where you would see the weakness, you know, if you were in the front. I'll tell you one thing, you can never get him out of a meeting. If he were talking to you, he was always late. If he was talking to you, he'd be looking you straight in the eye, and I'd be, or somebody else would be there saying, come on, Governor, we got to go. We're 20 minutes late, Governor. Come on, Governor. It was almost a joke. You know, we were always dragging him out of rooms. You know, he really enjoyed it.
How would you characterize the 8 years of Tom Kane in New Jersey's history?
I think he was a superior governor. I really do. I don't think that, I think Brendan Byrne was an excellent governor. I think that's why they probably do that article together. I think they are of a vintage that maybe we don't have anymore, you know? And I really do think he was an excellent governor. He cared a lot about the people, and I think he was an excellent governor. I really do. He wasn't there for self-aggrandizement, and I don't think Brendan was either. But subsequent governors, I think some of them were. And self-aggrandizement really is not the name of the game, you know. So.
You decided to leave the administration about 6 months before it ended.
Yeah.
To set up your own business? Is that why?
Well, initially, yeah, actually it was why. But initially I was offered a job at a lobbying firm. It was a terrific job. It was Katz, who was the original lobbyist, offered me this great job, and I turned it down.
Joe Katz?
Joe Katz. And when I called my son, I said, you know, I think I'm going to turn Joe Katz. It gave me a great offer. I'm going to turn Joe Katz down. He said, why am I not surprised? You know, it was a really stupid thing to do, but I decided I would start my own firm. And, you know, it was lean for a while because of the Florio years. But then when Chrissy decided, we had lunch one day, and she decided she was going to run, and she asked me if I was going to run. I said, not on your life, I'm not running. And she said, I said, I'm going to be joined at the hip with you. I'll do whatever you need me to do. And I actually left my business. And my partner, Judy Shaw, and a couple other people took over the business, and I was with her constantly. And when she won, which we weren't too sure about, and it wasn't by any great margin, when she won, it made all the difference in the world in my life. I had people in my office, I didn't know who the hell they were. I mean, I come into Arthur Goldberg from Bally's, who's no longer with us, which came down to my office one day, no appointment, and I walked in, and there he was. I said, "What can I do for you?" Introduced ourselves. "I want you to represent me." I said, "What do you want me to represent you?" "I want you to represent me." He said, "I'm a Democrat. I don't know anything about Republicans." He said, "I'm telling you straight up." I said, "Okay, let's sit down and talk." As it turned out, I did represent him because he was a terrific man. So it was like my whole world opened up. I mean, I had never in a million years thought I would have that kind of a future. But I got lucky.
You say that Christy Whitman asked you if you were going to run. Was it a thought at one point that you might run for governor?
Well, yeah, sure. I had, when I was in the transportation, as a matter of fact, you asked me the question that set up the whole press conference for me.
I'm delighted to hear that. What was it?
I had this press conference. Everybody thought I was going to announce to run for governor, and I was announcing that I was not going to run.
I remember that somewhat.
Okay. And 1 million people were there. I couldn't imagine why all these people showed up.
We all thought you were going to announce.
Yeah. And you said to me, "Is it because you're divorced and Jewish and whatever?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. Is that like Frank Lautenberg?" The whole place cracked up. It was really great. I have to thank you for that.
You're welcome. Why did you choose not to make the run?
I was very tired after 7.5 years. I'd worked really, really hard. I was very tired, and I didn't have a secure future at all. Although if I had run, I suppose that, I had a poll commissioned that my friends paid for, and it said $25,000 in those days was, a lot of money. Yeah, matter of fact, I think he charged me too much, but anyhow. And it said that my chances were as good as any of the other guys, and there were a whole bunch of them, if you remember correctly. What do we call them, the 7 dwarfs or 6 dwarfs or something. That my chances were as good as any of theirs, and that there was no problem in my being a woman. And then I spent the summer thinking really, really hard about it.
Which summer?
The summer before, the summer of...
92.
It was before then.
Was it?
Because I was a DOT when I decided I wasn't going to run.
I see.
It was before then. And...
so we're talking about running for governor in '89 then against Jim Corder with Chuck Hardwick and Bill Gormley.
Yeah, that's
and
right. The cast of thousands.
Right,
and I would have been the only woman in the race, and that was according to this poll a plus. I would be the only skirt. In those days, they wore skirts. We wore skirts. I would have been the only plus. That was a plus because I would have been the only woman. I had as good a chance as anybody else. Then I really got nervous, and I had to think hard about it. And I just decided that I had to worry about my future, and I had to secure my future, so I decided not to run.
I'm reminded that there used to be a button at one point in time that said, "I'm a hazelnut."
Yeah.
Was that around then?
That's right. A friend of mine was in an ad agency, had them made up for me, and I got a couple of thousand in my garage, if you want one.
If I were a collector, I'd grab one up. When Christy Whitman was governor and you were both her close friend and perceived in the political community as a way to get something before her or in front of her, you say that business took off. Is that a fair?
Business took off, and I want to tell you something interesting. Having been in the cabinet, you do not go to the commissioner if you got something this big, all right? And you sure as hell don't go to the governor. I don't think there was one instance in 7 years when I ever presented anything to Christy Whitman.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Never. I had a very strong feeling about that. I think I never wanted to do anything. She was my friend, but she was also governor, and I never wanted to do anything that might embarrass her or anything, so I just never discussed anything with her.
So how did you get things done for people?
I went to the Departments of State. Went to the front office and maybe spoke to, I don't know, the chief counsel, or went to the commissioners. I had the commissioners club and the legislative club, and so I didn't need to go to her.
What do you mean you had the commissioners club?
Well, once a commissioner, always a commissioner. I mean, during the last administration,
see.
you know, when people couldn't get things done, I'd pick up the phone and call, and, oh, yeah, come on in, Commissioner. You know, it's a big
So you
thing.
knew what door to knock on.
Yeah, and I also knew what rows to be of concern, important enough to go directly to a commissioner. Not everything, you know, it's crazy. And as I said, I went into the front office. I never went to Christie. I wanted her to have that plausible deniability, so she could, anybody ever started with it, she could say, hey, she's never come to me with anything.
I can't resist asking you, even though we're focusing on the Kane years, how you regard the 8 years of Christie Whitman.
I think she has gotten such a bad rap. Such a bad rap. I don't know how we're going to restore her reputation. She left $1 billion surplus. Donnie DeFrancesco, pardon my French, pissed it away. She got blamed for it. She cut taxes 28 times. She did some stupid things. Yeah, that thing in Camden with that guy that she patted down. I wanted to go out and shoot myself when I saw that one. She did some stupid things, no question about it. She borrowed from the fund for the pension fund. Hindsight's 20/20, you know. But I think she's gotten such a lousy rap. I don't think she deserves it. She's a far better governor than people give her credit for.
How would you compare her and Tom Kane? Similar, different?
Well, they're both of the manor born. That's similar right there. And, you know, Christie's family was deeply in Republican politics, her father and her mother. Similar in that sense, different times, but I think Tom Kane, to me, was the all-time #1 governor during my time. That doesn't mean to say that Christie was bad. It's just that Tom was exceptional, I thought.
Would you say her administration, her 2 administrations overall, were successful?
I thought they were, but when McGreevey started to run, he did something I don't think any other governor's ever done. And I could be dead wrong about this, but not that I noticed. He kept hammering on her, hammering on what she did was wrong, hammering on this. And to this day, people believe it. I was at a barbecue this past weekend, and somebody said something about Christie Whitman. Oh, Christie Whitman was a lousy governor. I said, stop right there. I said, she's my friend, and I don't want you to discuss it, because you don't know what you're talking about. But he stopped in the room. But, you know, I mean, to this day, the perception is there.
So what should we remember Tom Kane for?
You should remember Tom Kane for education, for the divestiture, for, I think environmentally, he made some great strides.
What was that era like in New Jersey?
Well, it was good. We had money. We're probably the last group that had money. You know, so great. We never met something we couldn't spend money on. It just got a little tough towards the end because we had spent too much, which was not terrific. But things were good. You know, if we needed something, we needed to hire somebody, you wanted to pave a road, you wanted to do this, we did it.
How about the state's image? Do you think it changed during the Kane years?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I think that the commercial that he made and his accent and the kind of guy he was, I absolutely think it changed. We have a lot more pride in it and in ourselves. And I think it's been like, you know, it's not great now.
You're a half-time resident of New Jersey now, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Are you hopeful about the state's future or pessimistic about the state's future?
Well, I think that the governor, Chris Christie, has a hell of a job on his hands. He's got to do all the things that nobody wanted to do before in order to straighten it out. I think a little state like New Jersey that has an $11 billion deficit, that's mind-boggling to me. I don't know how you do that. I think if they call him every name in the book, if he's able to straighten it out, it would have been worth it. Whether he ticks off every interest group and whether he ever gets reelected again, if he straightens it out, it'll have been worth it. And if he straightens it out, he'll get reelected, no matter what. Personality, it doesn't make any difference.
Hazel, I think think you've told us a lot in about an hour and a half.
Stop talking. Thank you.
Thank you.